Everyone, why don't we get started? Thank you so much for joining us today. My name is Michelle Rapp, and I work as Associate Director of Alumni Career Strategy in the Office of Alumni Relations. And I'm glad you're joining us today to learn about some new options and resources for your future. I'm excited to have Nancy Collamer here back for a second time with Northeastern. She gave a similar presentation about 5 years ago, and we were talking about how obviously a lot has changed. Nancy is a retirement coach and the author of Second Act Careers, 50 Ways to Profit from Your Passions During Semi-Retirement. She writes a bi-monthly blog on work and purpose for pbsnextavenue.org and publishes a free newsletter about Second Act careers through her website, mylifestylecareer.com. She's been in private practice since 1996 and holds an MS in career development from the College of New Rochelle and a BA in psychology from the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill. Nancy, I will turn it over to you.
Thank you so much, Michelle, and thank you to everyone for taking time out of your busy days to join the call. I am going to go ahead now and share my screen. Okay, so as you all know, we are here today to talk about Second Act careers. And in our session today, I have a couple of different objectives. The first is I really just want to expand your knowledge of the Second Act and entrepreneurial options that are out there for people after leaving their full-time jobs. I also want to share some of my favorite resources and sites. As you can imagine, I do this full-time. I concentrate on this space full-time, and I have a lot of great resources. And today I look forward to sharing some of those with you. So if you have a paper and pen next to you or just make some notes on your computer, that would be great. Also, I'm going to share a couple of exercises to hopefully help you get started down this path. And at the end, we will have some time for Q&A. So feel free to put your questions into the chat, but I won't be addressing those until the end. And when I talk about second acts, I do want to be clear here that I'm talking about it in terms of work that you can do that you can get paid for. And the format of that work, you might work as an entrepreneur. You could be somebody who works on a project or freelance basis. Perhaps you work as an employee on a part-time basis, or you might do what a lot of people do, is generate multiple streams of income. You might do a few different things during this time period. So what's out there? What looks most promising? Well, you'll notice here that I am going to present 5 key trends that I think are particularly relevant to people who are over 50. And the reason I'm not going to give you the 10 best jobs for people over 50 is because, quite frankly, those lists are just silly. All of you are coming to this experience with a lot of different, you have different toolboxes, different experiences, different levels of education, and also different lifestyle needs. And so I could present you with what people say are the 10 best, but it really doesn't matter. I think it's much more valuable to talk about it in terms of trends and what's happening in the marketplace. And without a question, the biggest trend that we're seeing right now, and by the way, all of these trends were in play pre-pandemic, but thanks, if you will, to the pandemic, these trends really accelerated. And the first trend is the expansion and the normalization of providing services virtually. I mean, look, by virtue of the fact that we are on this call today and you're all sitting, I assume, across the country, perhaps even globally, we've all become really used, right, to using tools like Zoom to get information and also to get services. And what this means is that the opportunity for virtual services for you to provide your expertise on a virtual basis has really exploded. And so when I say services, what do I mean by that? Well, people are doing teaching. They're either packaging their own courses or they're teaching through other larger outlets, through colleges and online education services. People are providing coaching and advising services of all different types. People are consulting. And then, of course, there's the whole arena of e-commerce. So what I'd like to do now is let me share with you, and these are all real life examples of people who are offering their services on a virtual basis that you might find actually a little surprising. And before I get into the actual people, though, let me say why I think this is so valuable for older people and retirees to consider. And the first is, when you work virtually, you do have a global reach. It opens you up to a global market. Obviously, as you know, to work from home, typically very low startup costs. It's flexible. It's very age friendly. I know of people who are offering consulting services who are in their 80s and they're sitting at home. If they had to get in a car and drive through a snowstorm to go deliver their consulting services, it'd be a lot tougher. The other thing is, by working virtually, it opens you up to partnership opportunities around the globe. You may find other service providers who you can partner up with, and together you can offer the services. And rather than just finding someone locally to do that, now you have global opportunities. So as I said, I want to give you a couple of examples just to sort of expand your idea of what's possible. And the first one is someone I know who is a stylist. And, you know, it's an interesting story. What she does is she helps people with putting together their wardrobe. She helps do some personal shopping with them if they're looking to clean out their closets, if they're looking for a dress for a special event. And she had always worked with people in person. That was what she was comfortable with. And when the pandemic hit, she thought, oh boy, you know, I can't, I'm stuck. I can't do this. And she had someone who said to her, you know, I bet if you just use the camera on your phone, you could do this virtually. And so she gave it a try and it worked. And so she started, during the pandemic, she offered something called a purge, purchase, and combined service. It was a virtual closet edit and shop combo. I think at the time she was charging like $480 for the package. She now charges $150 an hour for her services. But what she did was it was 2 hours of closet editing. It was 2 hours of personal shopping, and everything was done via Zoom. And what was particularly interesting about her story was the more she started to do it and the more she began to realize that, oh, actually this could work, is some people invited her to do some speaking to their groups. And as an example, she ended up speaking to a group of university women in London. And so then she got some clients overseas. So interesting example of how you can offer something you wouldn't think about on a virtual basis. Now that the pandemic has eased, she is doing both. She's offering a hybrid service. So next example, this is someone I know who she works as a therapist. She's a social worker. She's employed by her local Jewish family services. And again, during the pandemic, they went completely virtual with their services. The demand for mental health services, as you've probably heard, absolutely skyrocketed during the pandemic. So her problem is just she is constantly turning down business. Now, she works through her local Jewish family services. They find the clients for her. She works from home. She takes on as many clients as she feels comfortable with. But now she realizes the disadvantage of doing that is you're restricted by what they're able to pay you. Now she's decided she's going to get a local license. She will open up to therapy clients on her own, and she really can double her rates by doing that. But you don't have to be a licensed therapist to do this. All sorts of coaching services, whether it's weight coaching, whether it's I do retirement coaching. You know, it's funny, before the pandemic, when I would say to clients, would you be willing to meet by Zoom? People look like, deer in the headlights. They were just horrified by that idea. Now, everybody just assumes that's the way that we're going to meet. And as a result, I have a client base around the country. So as I said, any type of coaching service can be offered virtually. This is a really fun one. This is being a lactation consultant. And for those of you who are unfamiliar, lactation consultants are hired by new mothers who are having difficulty with breastfeeding. And, here again, this was something pandemic hit. She said, wow, there's no way I can do this on a virtual basis, but the need didn't go away. And so she had a mom who contacted her who was really desperate and who said, can't we try doing this by Zoom? She did, it worked. And there's two really interesting things about her story. One is that because of the pandemic, insurance companies started paying for virtual telehealth services, nutrition counseling, and all different types of telehealth services that insurance companies didn't pay for before. So suddenly she could get reimbursed for doing lactation consulting virtually, whereas she couldn't do that before. So it opened up the possibilities for payment, but it also meant that she was able to really increase her client load. Because before, when she had to drive to her clients' houses, it was a drive there, it was a drive back. So suddenly the hour that she was getting paid for turned into a 3-hour commitment. Now at the end of the hour, she can simply go on to the next client. So again, something that she did full-time during the pandemic, now offering it on a hybrid basis. And finally, I ended up we moved during the pandemic and we moved somewhere new. I'm terrible with picking out paint colors. And so we moved into a new place and I thought I could really use some help with this. I went online, I found a woman who does paint and color consults. And I walked around my new home with a FaceTime call and she looked at what I had. She then sent me samples. She charged me, I think it was $150 per room. I never met her. Everything was done virtually. So those are just 4 examples. I could go on and on with these. The point is that you might have a skill or a service that you might not have considered before offering virtually that could be doable. So in addition to offering advice, obviously there is the whole world of e-commerce and offering some sort of product via the internet. You no longer need to have a brick and mortar store. There, you can either have your own website that you sell your products through, but there are also sites like Etsy where, here's just a couple of things that I pulled. For my daughter's wedding, we found her, the person who did the invitation, we found her on Instagram. That's how we located her. We found these cute little, if you see those adorable little book cupcake toppers, when we had a baby shower for her a few years later, found those on Etsy. This obnoxious little, not little, big engagement for my other daughter when she got engaged, that was also something I bought off of Etsy. And I would not have found any of these people before, but now there's so many people offering products, again, through their own websites, through Instagram, through sites like Etsy. And it's really made it possible for people to set up a storefront easily and inexpensively. So, I would challenge you to just think, is there something that you could teach others? Are there processes that you have mastered either in your personal life? Maybe it's about weight loss. Maybe you've become a specialist about relocating and you have great advice to offer people as a relocation coach. What specialized knowledge do you have? And most importantly, where do you see the need in the marketplace? Because it is always the intersection of what you love to do, what you do well, and the need in the marketplace. That's where the sweet spot is. And that's where you find the opportunity to be successful. So I would challenge you to think about some of those things and then think about how you might be able to profit from those skills and strengths and interests, especially on a virtual basis. Okay, second trend is that Americans are starting new businesses at the fastest rate in more than a decade. Again, this happened, we saw this speed up quite a bit during the pandemic, but because of the technology, there are lots of people who have started their own businesses. Sometimes they're side businesses, sometimes they're full-time enterprises, but people have started all different types of businesses. And what this has opened up is opportunities for what I call entrepreneurial support services. Because here's the thing, people who run their own businesses, they start that business because they're great at their core business, right? There's someone who's great at being a jeweler, or they're great at being a nutritionist, but they don't know how to put together a website. They don't know how to put together a newsletter. They're totally clueless about how to market their services. Or maybe someone who, let's say, is a lawyer and they're in need of someone who can help them with translation services. Or a lot of people have started their own websites and they need someone who can help them with social media or editing and proofreading. And the list goes on and on and on of things that you can do. But you may have some sort of experience or skill from your corporate background that you could then offer to an entrepreneur. And the reason I really like this category of possibilities is because it is the category that typically takes the most advantage of your expertise, your network, your connections. Because of that, it oftentimes it's the easiest transition for people to make, and it offers the highest income potential. Again, if you're doing these services from home, typically very low start costs. And here's something else to think about. It's really easy to find entrepreneurs who are in need of your services. Every town has a chamber of commerce. Most cities have things like entrepreneurial networking groups, all sorts of groups where entrepreneurs get together. And those can be a really, really, really fertile ground for finding clients for your services. Obviously, it's work from home friendly. And also, and I think this is a really important point, when you offer your services to other entrepreneurs, typically your age and expertise is really an advantage. People don't care that you're not the person who they want to go out with for a beer after work. What they care about is, can you help me solve this problem? And so this is really an arena where your age and your years of experience can play to your advantage. And as I mentioned before, there's lots of different ways that you might offer your expertise. This couple here they actually are both lawyers. And so now in retirement, they're, quite honestly, they're spending most of their time traveling, taking care of grandchildren, but they're able to handle some legal contract work. Because of their legal expertise, they serve as board members on both for-profit and not-for-profit boards. And what's really interesting is they both love to travel. And as I mentioned, they're both attorneys. So they started a business, just a small business, but where they teach English legal terms to non-native English speakers. And so they get hired to go places like they recently went to Mexico and they met with a bunch of attorneys there. They didn't get paid their normal legal consulting rate, but they got paid enough. They met people who lived there, their travel costs were covered, and they had a lot of fun doing it. So there's lots of different ways that once you start to do this, you can begin to evolve what you're offering. This is another woman, a former client of mine, and she was someone who came out of corporate America. And when we worked together, what she realized that she really most enjoyed doing is she loved coaching people around public speaking. She started a public speaking coaching business. And over time, it has grown. She now gets paid by companies to come in and present. She does individual coaching. She offers corporate classes. She also serves as a board member. And she's put together a really very successful business, all around teaching other people how to be more effective public speakers. Okay, so third trend I want to talk about is, and this really ties into the first two trends, is the growth of what we called side gig platforms and apps. And what do I mean by that? Well, we're all familiar with side gig platforms like Uber, right? You can go in Uber, you click, you have someone who comes as a driver. And the majority of Uber drivers are over 50. But the reality is, over time, there has been an explosion in the number and the variety of side gig platforms that are out there. So this is just a very small sampling of the types of side gigs where you can go to the platform, you can put your information up, and you can become eligible to do work through that platform. So there's rover.com, where people work as dog walkers and pet sitters. Etsy, which I mentioned before, where people sell their own homemade crafts. There's Contently. That's a site for freelance writers, if you're interested in doing that. Lesson Face, I love the name of that one, where people teach music and acting. There's Dish Divvy, where people cook meals for pickup. You can even get paid to participate in mock juries online. So again, just a sampling, but there are literally hundreds of these sites out there. And so like anything, and particularly like anything online, there is both good and bad with these sites. And the advantage is that it is a really convenient and easy way to test out your interest in a new field. So let me share a story. I do some writing for Next Avenue, which is a PBS website for people over 50. And at one point, I interviewed a gentleman who had been a vice president. He retired, and he decided he'd really like to try his hand as a dog walker. And he thought, I know that sounds silly, but I love dogs. I love walking. It just seemed like a good fit for me. But I didn't want to spend a lot of money getting this business up and running without knowing if I would like it. So what he did was he went on rover.com. He, in less than an hour, he was able to put up a profile. He put up, about how much he loves dogs, a little bit about his information, his rates. And through Rover, then because they pay a lot to do the marketing, he started to get some customers. And he very quickly began to build up a following. And over time, he was earning, I think it was about $1,500 a month, doing dog walking using a site like Rover. So for him, it was a great way to test out his interests. He, built up the experience. It was convenient. It worked really well. Now, the issue with these sites is two big issues with them. The first is that, as you can imagine, they're not doing this for free, right? Rover, if you go and sign up with them, they want a cut because they're paying for the marketing and to have the website up there. And so you are not going to earn what you could earn on your own. But you're not beholden to them forever. You can use it as a way to test it out, and then you can begin to create your own business later. So there is the issue of you are going to pay the platform or the site some percentage of what you earn. And different sites have different payment terms and regulations. And as I said, almost inevitably, what that means is that the rate that you're going to get paid will be far less than what you could earn on your own. But for what a lot of people find is, at least initially, that's a good trade-off that they offer. If you write nothing else down, and believe me, I have no affiliation with this site. I don't get paid anything for recommending them, but I strongly recommend that you check out this site that I have down here, Side Hustle, spelled HUSL.com. This is my favorite site for seeing lots and lots of these platforms in one place. And Kathy Christoph, the woman who runs this, is actually a journalist, and she started the site because she was very wary of what was being offered on a lot of these sites. And so the best way I can describe Side Hustle is it's sort of like a Yelp of all the different platforms that are out there. You can go on there. They rate the sites 1 to 5. She posts reviews about them, and she really digs into them. Do they pay what they say they're going to pay? Are there really good, solid opportunities here? I think it is an invaluable resource. So if you have any interest in pursuing this, highly recommend that you check out that site. Okay, the fourth trend that I want to talk about is what I call home sweet home. And obviously during the pandemic, we all spent a lot of time at home, and that created a real bump in the need for certain services. I can't see everyone on the call, but I bet if I said to you, how many of you got a dog or a cat during the pandemic, I would see a lot of hands go up. If I asked, how many of you got into baking sourdough bread or starting a garden, probably a lot of hands would go up, right? And so even though we are now sort of post-pandemic, the reality is a lot of those habits got established. And so people did spend a lot of money on fixing up their homes and creating gardens and getting interested in cooking and on their pets. And so here again, this has opened up some interesting avenues for work possibilities. And that includes everything from, as I mentioned, pet services and products, people doing, helping out with staging and organizing services and home renovations. You know, during the crazy boom in the housing market, there wasn't a ton of need for those services, but now the market is slowing down. And so the need for that is improving. People who are interested in hiring people to help out with gardening services and landscaping advising, age in place services. And I'll talk more about the whole aging market in just a little bit, but that's a big need coming up for that. So I'll give you just a moment to take a look at some of these stats because they're pretty mind-blowing. So as you can see here, gardening has taken off. Americans are just nuts when it comes to their pets. And I have to tell you, the number that I had down here 2 years ago was under 100 billion. And now it's 124 billion just in, I mean, that's a mind-boggling number. 2021, people spend a ton of money on their animals. And we are spending a lot of money on our houses as well. So if you're interested in thinking, you know, if you have an idea, gee, maybe I'd like to start a, you know, dog biscuit company. I would like to become a home stager. Where do you go for information? And there are lots of resources out there to help you. The first thing is the U.S. Small Business Administration offers all sorts of training programs and support services. And under their auspices is something called SCORE, which SCORE is a fabulous resource. SCORE.org is the website. And if you take advantage of SCORE, first of all, they have a lot of webinars that you can tune into online. But I think their most valuable resource is they will pair you up with someone who can be your mentor. So let's say you're interested in selling a specialty food product. SCORE will find someone in that arena who they can match you up with, and for free, they will provide mentoring services. It's really an invaluable resource. Another thing that's terrific are industry associations. And I kid you not, there is an industry association for every type of business that you can possibly think about. When I mentioned specialty food products, there's an industry association for people who are in the chocolate world, for people who are in the, you know, the organic specialty food. Within every industry, there is an industry association. And those can be a great way to meet other people, to learn about training programs, and to just really get up to speed on what's happening in that world. Take a look at what other entrepreneurs are doing in that space. So here again, let's say you're somebody who's interested in Gene, maybe I'd like to do I'd like to help somebody who's moving out of their forever home and they're going into assisted living, and I'd like to learn how to be a senior move manager. Well, you can just Google senior move managers and take a look at what are the services that other senior move managers are offering. It will give you an idea of what's possible. And finally, this last one here is something called Side Hustle School. That site is run by a gentleman named Chris Gillibo, who has several books out that are geared for solopreneurs. And it is a wealth of information for people who are curious about different types of interesting businesses that they might be able to start. So finally, I mentioned before about services where you help the aging population. And I'm sure you have all seen those commercials that say 10,000 people are retiring every day. I now hear it's closer to 11,000 people. The bottom line is there's a lot of us getting older. We make up a large part of the population. And all of the services and products that older people use is what they call the longevity economy. And I will tell you that this is actually from a couple of years ago. And back then it was valued at 7.6 trillion, and that's trillion with the T. I don't even understand what that number means. Just let's all agree it's a big number. And there's a lot of different opportunities in the senior space. And I want to be very clear here. I'm not just talking about things like caretaking services. I'm talking about all sorts of other services that older people need. Everything from help with financial management, fitness classes that specialize in seniors, boutique travel experiences for grandparents and grandchildren. What we call honey-do services. I happen to live in a 55 plus community, and there's a gentleman here who, pretty much works, I think, almost full time. He goes to people's homes when they need help with hanging pictures or fixing screen doors or what have you. Senior move managers, as I mentioned before, age in place contractors. Those are people who help people adopt their houses to make it easier for people to age in place. Insurance consultants, the list goes on and on and on. And the advantages of you working in this field is, first of all, as I said, we're a big cohort. 20% of Americans will be over 65 by 2040. Again, low startup costs, it's flexible, work from home friendly. And this is an arena where the fact that you are older is an asset, it's an advantage, because people want to hire people who they can relate to. And so somebody who needs help with assisting their mother with moving out of their forever home and moving into an independent living community is going to feel a whole lot more comfortable if the person they hire is 60 than 26. So your age really can be an asset in this type of world. So as I said, it's a growing arena, lots of possibilities, and I want to give you some resources that can help you explore more. And the first would be AARP that we're all familiar with, AARP.org. If you take a look at their site, there's just Stanford Center on Longevity, which is affiliated with Stanford University, and they have a lot of just interesting studies and programs around the whole longevity arena, and I'd recommend that you sign up for their newsletter. Next Avenue, which is the site that I write for, which is geared towards people over 50, the American Society on Aging, and then just locally in your community, a lot of communities have initiatives now that have started that are really aimed towards older people in their community, and there might be an opportunity for you to get involved with one of those. So I know that I've just thrown a lot of information at you, but just to review the 5 arenas where I see really good things percolating is the expansion of virtual services, the explosion in Americans starting their own businesses, particularly as solo entrepreneurs, the increase in side gig platforms and apps. As I said, there's both good and bad with those. So be a careful consumer if you go down that road. The whole arena of home sweet home, all the things that are products and services connected to our lives at home and with family. And finally, the longevity economy. Now, all of this information, I'm sure some of you are sitting there thinking, this is interesting. Nancy Scott got me thinking now. But, I like this Japanese proverb that vision without action is daydream and action without vision is nightmare. So in terms of you moving forward and taking the next step, I always say to people, it's a seesaw. You have to do the internal work. You have to really think about what's important to you and what you're good at and what you value. At the same time that it's great to do all of the thinking and analysis, but don't get into analysis paralysis. It's really important to start taking small actions to help you move forward. So a couple of questions just to get you started is when you're thinking about what's next, think about what type of work schedule or perhaps schedules could potentially work best for you. Second question is, people always talk about a bucket list with retirement, but I love this term. I always say to people, well, that's great, but what's on your bucket list? What are you looking forward to leaving behind when you leave the full-time job? What is it that you're just, hey, I'm done with sitting inside an office all day. I'm done with doing work that I'm not passionate about. I'm really tired of just doing things for profit instead of something that's more mission-based. Or you might be somebody, I've had former teachers and nurses and doctors say to me, I'm sort of done with being mission-based. At this point, I'd like to do something to earn a little money. So everyone's list is going to be individual and different, but what's on your bucket list? Do think about how important are benefits, because particularly if you go out on your own, benefits may not be an easy part of the equation. What are your non-negotiables? What are you just not willing to budge on? And finally, what's your timeline? I think that's an important thing to think about if you're going to work after retirement. Are you looking to do something for the next 2 years or the next 10 years? And what does that look like? So something that you can do in your I know you all have lots of spare time, but here's something just sort of easy that you can do is jot down some of your past jobs, the key roles and responsibilities, and then just walk away from it and then come back and look at it and say, well, are there any skills and projects here that jump out at me that maybe I could build on going forward as a consultant or a teacher or offering some sort of product? Think about your lifestyle goals. And again, take a look at what other providers are offering, because that really can give you a sense of what's possible. And spend some time just reflecting on the findings and then go ahead and connect the dots. And finally, as I said, it is really important to do just take small steps to take action. Consider taking a class, attend a webinar, listen to a podcast. There's a lot out there to help you get started. Do some informational interviews with potential role models. Talk to somebody who's maybe doing something similar to what you're considering. Find a volunteer or an internship opportunity. And again, check out the many online resources that are now available. And buddy up for success. This can be just trying to do all of this on your own can be really hard, and it's just so much more fun if you can find a friend or a group who you can get together with and brainstorm ideas. So to learn more, I invite you to come to my website. By the way, I do have on my website, it's for free. I never do anything with the information. There is a workbook that you can download that has 25 questions to consider to get you started on your next act. And also you can take a look at some of the articles that I've written for Next Avenue, as well as lots of other people's articles. I think you'll get some great ideas about what people out there are doing and some useful information about strategies and tips to get rolling. And so with that said, I am going to hand it back to Michelle and we will open this up for questions.
Wonderful. And I think just it makes it easy to type questions into the chat. Love to hear what you're wondering about. And I did throw into the chat, Northeastern is doing a lot with alumni entrepreneurs. So I sent you a link to our page of different resources coming through alumni relations and other parts of campus. I'm also curious if there are types of businesses that people are having or types of second acts that people are thinking about, if you don't have a question.
And if we don't have any questions, I think it might be interesting if somebody would be willing to share, if someone has a story about somebody that they know who is doing something interesting after they left their full-time job. I don't know if somebody would be willing to share that, but if
you can unmute yourself for that.
Yeah, hi, this is Michael Farah, class of 87. I've gone through an experience. I lost both my parents last year. And you hit the nail on the head. The seniors are really struggling. My parents were both 87 years old and they had 5 siblings, but it's very, very difficult to get help they were in a community. But when they did pass, there's a huge need for unloading or cleaning out the house, getting it for sale. I mean, I've been feeling overwhelmed in the last year, but just trying to contact people to do real estate appraisers. And, we wound up donating, lots and lots of furniture and lots of items. But what's changed during the pandemic is that a lot of these places don't want to accept it. Goodwill is not taking furniture, in certain areas, or books or, albums. We had the generation, they saved everything. And so that's a huge business and something that I'm looking to do because there's so much need for it.
Yeah, Michael, thank you so much for sharing that. I will tell you that on Next Avenue, the site that I write for, the single most popular article ever was that my editor wrote an article titled, "No, Your Kids Don't Want Your Parents' Stuff." And it immediately—
Or grandchildren.
Right. It immediately went viral. And as a result of that article, it spawned a number of other articles on this topic. And you're absolutely right. There is an enormous need for lots of different services to help older people. And that's why I do really focus in on that as one of the 5 key trends. And as I said, I think this is an area that not only is really ripe from a dollars and cents perspective, but I think also as we get older ourselves, it can be a really satisfying population to work with. So there's a lot happening in that arena that's worth taking a look at.
Yeah, so that's a huge business opportunity. And just for someone to have confidence, I reached out, I won't spend too much time, but I reached out to several people that give us appraisals. But, just what do you do with the coins? What do you do with the artwork? What do you do with the furniture? Some of the furniture's, worth $2,500. Not that anybody will pay for that, but, what do you do with it? And you want to honor and then the other siblings, they just said, donate it. Okay. But that's not easy. So there's a whole service just to walk you through that.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. And this is where taking a look, I have my book, Second Act Careers, and I interviewed a woman who became a senior move manager, is someone who helps people with these types of issues. And one of the things she said to me is that I found very interesting, and I've heard this from other senior move managers who I've interviewed, is she said, negotiating those, how should we put it, difference of opinion between the siblings and the children is as much of her job as it is figuring out the logistics of the move. So, I think it's really helpful. And the way that she learned about becoming a senior move manager was that she went to a conference of senior move managers, and she hopped on a plane. She went to the conference. She immersed herself in that world for several days and really learned about how to get going in that type of business and what are some of the issues that people in that type of business face. And, you can do that for, again, every type of business. And I think going to conferences these days, a lot of industry associations too are offering their services through things like webinars, and they have training programs. So that can be a great way to get started. And if you can go in person, it's even better.
Nancy, there's a question from Jack. If starting a consulting business, do you recommend stating that there is a virtual as well as an in-person option and rate?
That is an interesting question. And I think it really depends upon the type of consulting that you're doing. So there is, there is both what we call B2B or B2C consulting. So business to consumer consulting. So that could be somebody, which is like what I do. I do retirement coaching. So I have my business, but my clients are individuals for the most part. So for me in my business, whether I meet with somebody in person or whether I meet with someone virtually, I charge the same rate. With businesses, B2C, if you're doing consulting to a company, they may negotiate your contract slightly differently. So it really depends upon the type of consulting that you're doing. And that's where working with someone at SCORE or taking some of the webinars through a place like Small Business Administration can help you learn more about that. And that's also, another thing I think that is incredibly helpful for people when they're starting their own business is to find other people doing similar type businesses. So as an example, my background is in career coaching. I have a master's in career development. And for many years, I had a group of career coaches who we would get together once a quarter over lunch, and we would just talk shop and we would compare what was going on with, what we're seeing in the marketplace and talk about, pricing or packages and services. And we all had slightly different markets that we were addressing. So we didn't see each other as competitors. And it was incredibly helpful. So if you're thinking about doing consulting, find some other people who are doing consulting as well. And you can really bounce ideas off of each other. And that can be very useful. Makes it more fun too.
Any other examples that people want to share? Oh, we've got another question. Is there a formal assessment you recommend to people in the 50+ group that you think is particularly helpful?
So I have to tell you, as I mentioned before, I have a master's in career development. And so as part of getting my master's, I took an entire semester on assessments. And for those of you on the call who are not familiar with assessments, you might be familiar with things like the Strong-Campbell interest inventory or the Myers-Briggs. These are all essentially what we call, sort of tests that people take, and you plug in your information and they say, here's how you score. For me personally, I'm not a huge, having done many of these, I'm not a huge fan of assessments. So I think it's much better to really think about some key questions. That's why I put together that free workbook on my site. I think you can get at the information you need much more easily by doing that. And you start there and then talk with someone. It doesn't have to be a retirement coach. Again, you can get together with some friends who are going through the same process at the same time. And then begin to explore the options that are out there after that. And one of the problems, and I see this is from Deb, that with the assessments, particularly in this age group, can be that so many of the job titles that these assessments generate, quite frankly, are dated. There's so many other possibilities out there, and it's evolving all the time. So, if you're someone who finds assessments valuable, I mean, I do like the Myers-Briggs. I think it's just helpful information, but it's only one piece of the puzzle. And I see Deb says, same process she uses. Yeah, I think you can get at it a whole lot more easily by questions. I mean, look, I love those quizzes in the magazines as much as anybody, and I take them and wait to see what it says about me, but they're of limited value.
Any other examples that people want to share?
So Michelle, if no one has an example, I do want to just share a story that happened to me recently. As I mentioned, we moved somewhere new. I had someone come in and give us a pain estimate, and we got to chatting. And my husband happened to come in as he was getting ready to leave, and my husband had just been out playing tennis. They started chatting about tennis. Anyway, it came out that he had been on the pro circuit. And so I said, oh, well, that's interesting. He said, yeah, I used to string rackets for pro players. And he worked for many years for Andre Agassi and several other big names. And I said, and doing what I do for a living, of course, I said to him, well, that's so interesting. How did you get into doing that? And I loved his story, because what he said it's a really funny story. He said, quite frankly, I was a pretty aimless teenager. I was working at Dick's Sporting Goods. I had long hair. I'm working at Dick's Sporting Goods, earning, barely minimum wage. And one day I was on my break, and I happened to be in the break room, and being Dick's Sporting Goods, they had this magazine there about tennis equipment, again, very specialized information. He's flipping through it. He happens to see this ad that they're looking for a professional tennis racket stringer. And he thought, well, what the heck? I've done this at Dick's. He throws in his resume. The PS to the story is, it turns out it's this job to work for these pro players. He ends up going all around the world for 5 years, spent 5 years going to pro tournaments, working for pro players, had this incredible experience, all because he was sort of in the right world. He enjoyed sports, so he was working in a sporting goods store, and he decided to throw his resume into the mix. And this ad apparently just didn't generate that much response, and he got the job. And I love that story, because I think it just illustrates that so much of what happens with people with finding new possibilities is, put yourself on the right playing field, whether it's a tennis court, or whether it's you're somebody who wants to be in food or with animals or with seniors. Start doing something in that arena, and then that one thing will lead to the next thing. It is always a path. You never know how it's going to turn out before you start. But sometimes, amazing things can happen. So hopefully I can leave you with that thought.
Any last chance, comments or questions? Well, Nancy, this has been super interesting and inspiring to see all these options. And I think your approach of looking at trends, giving us examples, and then some of these unique resources is perfect. So I think you've gotten it rolling. I think too, definitely encourage people to follow up with the self-assessment part and thinking about your interests and passions and the needs that you might see out there. But thank you again, Nancy. This has been really helpful. And thank you all for coming today. Let me know if I can be help to you as you explore some of these ideas. Many thanks.
Thank you. Take care, and everyone enjoy your day.
Bye-bye.